we welcome Senator Brent Taylor, who I've not had the opportunity to meet. We spoke on the phone earlier today, and it's a pleasure to have him on the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Senator, good afternoon.
Matt, thank you for having me. I've been a senator for a year and a half, haven't been on yet, so I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. I appreciate you spending some time with us. I appreciate your efforts in an attempt to tackle the crime issues that are in Shelby County, Tennessee, that are in Memphis, Tennessee. Let's talk broadly about your efforts to tackle that and who you have on your side locally, who you have on your side in the General Assembly, and what your overall goal is. Obviously, it's to tackle some of this crime problem.
That's part of it. You know, I came into the Senate with the idea that I wanted to essentially change the narrative about Memphis in the General Assembly. And so I've really kind of the theme for my tenure so far has been to make Memphis matter. And one of the things that I've done is I've brought different senators from different parts of the state down to Memphis so that they can meet Memphians. They have met with our political leadership. They've met with the business community. They've met with faith leaders. They've met with crime victims. And really just so that other senators from across the state can come down and see that Memphis is more than a headline, that we are an asset worth investing in, and really begin to know Memphians the way I know Memphians. And every one of these senators, Matt, is left saying the same thing, and that is that your crime problem is worse than I thought it was, but Memphis's potential is greater than I thought it was. And so I've been working real hard. I've been working harder than an ugly stripper to try to make Memphis matter in the legislature.
I did not have an ugly stripper reference on my bingo card today, Senator. I'm glad. That's pretty good. Look, Memphis has such wonderful things to offer the greater Tennessee community, and obviously you know this better than me. But I would suggest to you that my family, we make ourselves available to the city of Memphis and vice versa with regard to tourism possibilities or whatnot. But sadly, the reputation is that you have to do it during certain times. You have to make sure that you're not in certain places during certain times for fear that crime will spill over to some of the tourism that, I mean, you live that on a regular basis. How do you battle that, especially when you are not embraced by the local officials trying to gain your assistance, but you are oftentimes confronted by them for suggesting that they tackle the crime in the manner that you're trying to do?
Yeah, and you're right, because the crime is such an acute crisis in Memphis that it's actually beginning to change people's behaviors. You know, half of my Senate district is in Memphis. The other half takes in the suburbs and unincorporated parts of Shelby County. And so I've got friends and constituents that live, say, in Germantown and Collierville that used to enjoy going into town and eating in restaurants or going to a Grizzlies game or a University of Memphis game or going down to events at Tom Lee Park. And they don't do that anymore because they're afraid of the crime situation. So they just wind up spending all their money in the suburbs and never coming into East Memphis, for example, to enjoy our restaurants. So it really is beginning to change people's perceptions or patterns, if you will. And I've also heard from people saying, I won't let my wife get gas anymore. I do it for her in the evenings. They make sure they got enough gas to get to work and back home. So it's changing people's behaviors. Now, I will say, it's probably not fair to say that the local political leadership has not embraced my efforts. I think we all agree on the goal. All of us want to safer Memphis. I think where they begin to disagree with me on certain ways to accomplish that goal. There are many ways to do it, and 90% of the things we are in complete agreement on. But it's things like the bail reform that I'm working on, and also with the routine traffic stop bill that we passed last Sunday. So there's specific items that they disagree with, but we agree on the overall goal. We want to make Memphis safer.
What is your and I've played the clip I've played the clip twice now, and I know you've heard it. I don't need to necessarily replay it for you, Senator, but what is your response to Senator Charlane Oliver when she insinuates that racism is behind your traffic stop bill?
Well, first I'll say her remarks are unfortunate, and certainly you wouldn't think would be becoming of a senator. However, I will say this: I think she was angry because she had tried to seek recognition to speak on the bill, and had been inadvertently overlooked by the speaker. And the question got called, so she never got an opportunity to speak. And that's really, I think, what angered her, and it's unfortunate. And I even made a comment to the media afterwards that I wish she had had an opportunity to speak. She was going to speak against my bill, but I wanted everybody to be heard. And so I just think she was frustrated in the moment and probably said something that she later regrets saying. But, it's unfortunate. But look, I learned a long time ago when I was on the city council down in Memphis that the most important vote's not the one you just took. The most important vote's the next one you're fixing to take. And so I just look forward to our session later this afternoon, and we'll have a lot of important legislation that Senator Oliver and the rest of us will probably all agree on.
Senator Brent Taylor is with us. He is representing Memphis, talking about his legislation that would return certain duties and abilities that the local police in Memphis have to facilitate stops. Tell us specifically what this legislation would do, and how do you agree with some that are characterizing it as an override of the local ordinance?
Thank you for that opportunity. What happened, Matt, was last year, following the tragic murder of Tyree Nichols, a Memphian who was beat to death by 5 rogue police officers, the city council rushed and passed an ordinance that essentially banned 5 different types of routine traffic stops. And they named it the Tyree Nichols Driving Equity Act, I believe is the name of it. But essentially what it said was that police can't pull people over for those 5 offenses. And it was things like expired tag, broken headlight or tail light, or a loose or a missing bumper. But what happened is it's caused a lot of confusion because the former mayor, on his way out the door, said he never enforced it. The police chief said, well, actually, we did enforce it. The new mayor has said, yeah, we're going to enforce that ordinance. But it really puts the police department, police officers, in a really difficult spot because all 5 of those offenses that they banned police from enforcing are actually state offenses as well. And so a police officer is then is put in a position where they could face disciplinary action for enforcing state law. So Mayor Young sent a letter to the General Assembly, the Senate, saying, look, this is preemption and the state shouldn't do it. Let us make our own rules in Memphis. I agree with the mayor. It is about preemption, but it was about the city council preempting state law. So as I discussed this with my colleagues in the Senate, what I convinced them of is we can't have local and municipal governments, local county and city governments deciding which laws they don't like that we pass in Nashville and just simply preempting them. So that's why I think this legislation was important, to send the message that local governments can't preempt state law, and we need to allow our police officers to have all the tools necessary to enforce the law and essentially take the handcuffs off our police and put them on the criminals where they belong.
Well, the precipitating event in my mind, and I don't mean to bog down into the details, but I want to separate what you're trying to do and the tragic circumstances surrounding the death of Tyree Nichols, because it's my understanding the precipitating event was the fact that he ran. Right, I'm not justifying what the cops did after that, but it seems to me that Senator Oliver and others want to suggest, Senator Taylor, that the causal factor was the stop. Does that make sense to you? And I don't believe the causal factor was the stop at all. I think it was the running post-stop that led, unfortunately, to the extracurricular activities on the part of these 5 officers.
Well, I think it's actually more sinister than that, Matt. I think in looking at the tape, the body camera video, I think those 4 of those 5 officers, they targeted that young man. And it had nothing to do with the stop. I think for whatever reason, those officers had it in for Tyree Nichols.
There's a something pre-existing?
Something. I mean, we may never know. But I don't think it had anything to do with the stop. And it's my understanding that Tyree Nichols initially complied, but he was being so severely beaten that
Right.
he did probably what any of us would try to do, is get away. And so there's just no getting around the fact that it was 5 bad officers that killed this young man. And as I said on the Senate floor the other day, that bad cops are criminals and good cops protect Tennesseans. And so these cops have got everything they've got coming to them, and I hope they spend the rest of their natural life in prison for what they did to that young man. But as much empathy as we may have for Tyree Nichols and his family, we can't let that cloud our judgment and how we're going to protect 7 million Tennesseans. And that's why it was important we passed that bill.
You met with the family last Thursday. What, if anything, can you tell us about that meeting? Obviously, I don't want to get into confidential conversations, but what can you tell us about the visit?
Sure. Obviously, they were wanting us to not pass the bill. They asked if I would delay the bill, and I respectfully declined. I just said that I thought it was in the best interest of everybody to go ahead and move forward with the bill. And I told them that, I don't expect you to agree, but, y'all need closure to this. The city needs closure to this. We need to go on and pass this bill today so we can get past this, because the vote outcome is not going to change if I delay it a week. Obviously, they were very disappointed and heartbroken that I wouldn't do that, and they left in tears, and I can certainly understand and empathize with that. And if I were in their position, I'd probably feel the same way. But I have a duty larger than a single family. I have a duty to work to do what I can to protect 7 million Tennesseans. And look, I will work with the Nichols family. I will work with Democrats. I will work with the city of Memphis to find a more meaningful way to honor the life of Tyree Nichols. But allowing that ordinance to hinder the police department from doing their job is not the way to honor Tyree Nichols.
Finally, and Senator Brent Taylor is with us talking about past legislation, and I think I misspoke. It's already passed the House. Is that right, Senator?
That's correct. It is on its way to the governor.
Okay, very good. Do you have an indication that the governor plans on signing it?
I have no reason to believe that he won't sign it, but I do know that the Nichols family has asked to meet with him before he decides what he wants to do with that. And as you know, Matt, there are 3 options there. He can sign the legislation into law. He could allow it to go into law without his signature, or he could veto it. And if he were to veto it for whatever reason, obviously we could override his veto with a simple majority. But I suspect he'll either sign it or allow it to go into law without his signature.
And you indicated as much at the beginning of the conversation, and I appreciate the calming tone and the calming nature of the remarks that you made. But when you hear a fellow senator talking about rioting or responding in such fashion, what's your response to that? And do you just chalk that up to the passion of the moment last week from Senator Oliver?
I chalk it up to the passion of the moment. But I will say this, and that is that it's unfortunate. We have seen this at the national level as well, where political opponents throw around terms like Jim Crow and racist and white supremacist to where those words have lost their sting. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's been overused. And so I just think it's unfortunate because it does nothing to advance the conversation. And if we believe that, then just because I disagree with my wife does not make me a misogynist. It just means we have a difference of opinion. And I think it's perfectly fine to have differences of opinion, but when those type of terms, Jim Crow and Confederates and white supremacists and racists, get thrown around all the time, they lose their sting. And they get dismissed when there is real racism that exists that we ought to focus our attention on, but you can't see it when everything is racist.
Finally, and several of our listeners on our Members Nutrition Super Text line have requested that I ask you this final question, Senator, and I know your time's valuable and I won't keep you after this, but what's next for specifically West Memphis, but just broadly Memphis? What is next in the steps that you want to take to try to bring more law and order back to that community and see a reduction in crime?
Yeah, thanks for those questions. We've got several bills that we'll be considering on bail. Right now, one of our biggest problems is the police will do a fine job in catching somebody. They put them in jail, and before the police can finish their paperwork, the people are right back out on bail. And so we've got several bills that will make it more difficult for people to get out of jail and on bail. And look, right now it's harder to get into jail than it is a Taylor Swift concert, and we have to turn that around. And so I've got several bail reform bills that will do that. The biggest one is probably the ability to pay. Right now in Shelby County, they're operating under a consent agreement that essentially says they ask the person how much money you have in your pocket, and that's how much your bail is. Well, we're going to change that so that some of these people will remain in jail pending their trial.
Senator, great conversation. I look forward to getting to shake your hand. It seems that your district in Shelby County and in Memphis is well represented by you, and we appreciate your time today. Take care, and we'll talk again very soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Yes, sir. There's Senator Brent Taylor joining us for about 20 good minutes, talking about his legislation, the purpose behind it, his meeting with the family of Tyree Nichols, and his response to some of the words of a very distressed Charlane Oliver. We'll be back after this.